Now, 10,000 insurgents. Their numbers are soaring with their success on the battlefield as ISIS threatens another key target. Can 90 newly arrived American advisors really make much of a difference? Baghdad exposed. While Iraqi troops claim some successes, we'll take you beyond the outskirts of the capital where defenders are hard to find. And a big night for the Tea Party. An ugly, very important battle underway for the GOP in Mississippi. Why are Democrats voting for a Republican? I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room. Right now, there's a closed-door briefing on Iraq for all members of the United States Senate. They may be finding it pretty disturbing. U.S. officials now put the number of ISIS insurgents inside Iraq and Syria as high as 10,000. Their numbers growing with each stunning and savage success on the battlefield. At the same time, the Pentagon now says new U.S. troops have just arrived in Iraq. Their mission, to try to help Iraq's military counter this ISIS terrorist threat. The latest battle is for control of Iraq's biggest oil refinery, and it's not clear at all if Iraqi airstrikes will really make much of a difference. CNN's Nick Robertson and Arwa Damon, they're both standing by in Iraq. I'll also speak with a key Iraqi insider, but let's begin our coverage this hour with our Pentagon correspondent, Barbara Starr. What are you learning, Barbara?
Wolf, the latest is the Pentagon a short time ago announced U.S. military advisors are back on the ground inside Iraq. About 130 of them now near the embassy in Baghdad and working to set up a joint operations center in the Baghdad region with the Iraqis. That's 130 advisors there and another 50 on the way in the coming days, all part of the president's plan to send up to 300 military advisors into Iraq. Their first job, they're going to stick around the Baghdad area for a while. They will assess, we are told, what the state of Iraqi forces are, what the state of ISIS forces are. Iraqi forces, as we know, up in the north and the west, in some sense of disarray after ISIS has come through. What is the ISIS state of play? ISIS, the latest estimate, there may be up to 10,000 insurgents in this region between Syria and Iraq, the border having virtually disappeared, people moving back and forth, weapons moving back and forth, ISIS on the march, living off of its extortion schemes, we are told, bringing in millions of dollars, even as those ISIS forces are stretched over a very long distance and their supply lines are stretched, they are bringing in the money to keep themselves going. So if President Obama were to order airstrikes against these ISIS fighters, what might it look like? Let's go to a map, Wolf. There are now 7 U.S. Navy warships in the Gulf, aircraft on board, Tomahawk missiles, 1,000 Marines in the region, some on those ships, some already ashore. And perhaps the most interesting thing, about 30 U.S. military missions over Iraq every day now, both manned aircraft and drones, collecting intelligence about where ISIS is on the ground. 30 U.S. military flights over Iraq every day. It has not been like this since 2011 when U.S. troops left, Wolf.
Getting a lot of reconnaissance, getting a lot of surveillance, checking out what's going on. Barbara, stand by. I want to go to Iraq right now. Our senior international correspondent, Nick Robertson, is joining us. I understand there's a lot of activity around the U.S. Embassy in that so-called green zone in Baghdad. Nick, what are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Well, throughout today, we've seen a number of helicopters that are normally associated with the U.S. Embassy here flying in and out of it, appearing to come from the direction of the international airport. And then this evening, after dark, helicopters taking off from the vicinity where we believe is the U.S. Embassy, taking off from there. And then when they're getting a little up in the air, dropping off flares before flying off again. We're not getting any indication on the ground where they're going, who precisely who's on board, but it certainly does seem to come at a time when we know that these additional 90 advisors have landed in the country at the moment. Also this evening, another development on the state television, the Iraqi army, or Air Force at least, shown landing helicopters at that oil refinery. Beji, the largest oil refinery in the country, produces much of the country's gas for the cars here, and also cooking gas. So the government clearly trying to show that it is back in control of some, if not all, of that oil refinery. The government is really trying to get back on the front foot here and show that it's making gains, Wolf.
Nick, I understand you also made a dangerous trip outside of Baghdad today. What did you see?
Well, what we wanted to do was get to the west of Baghdad. We know that the army has essentially drawn a line in the sand to stop the ISIS advance coming in from the west, from Al-Anbar province. You know, how they're using those gains, the highways that they've got control of now, linking to their safe havens in Syria. We're not able to get all the way out to the front lines there. The security checkpoints become quite frequent, and we were told that it was too dangerous to go any further on. But what we are seeing, surprisingly, is not a lot of tanks, not a lot of heavy armor when you get out towards the west of the city. There are checkpoints, but even they seem relatively thinly manned, and not a lot of heavy military equipment, which kind of raises the question, if ISIS fighters push through whatever there is beyond that, further out on the edge of the city, seems that they wouldn't meet a whole lot of resistance. And we're talking about, we were beyond the city limits today, wouldn't meet a lot of resistance right at the city limits, Wolf.
Nick Robertson in Baghdad for us. Thank you. We'll check back with you a little bit later. The extent of the disaster in Iraq can be measured by the refugee crisis. It's a huge refugee crisis right now. The terrorist onslaught sent 500,000 people fleeing from the major city of Mosul alone, pushing the total of displaced Iraqis to more than 1 million. Let's go live to our senior international correspondent, Arwa Damon. She's in the northern Iraqi city of Erbil. Arwa, tell us what you're seeing.
Well, Wolf, earlier in the day, we went to one of these refugee camps that has sprung up following this ISIS offensive. It's about, say, 45 minutes, a half-hour drive maybe, north of Mosul in the relatively safe autonomous region of Iraqi Kurdistan. And a lot of the families there, Wolf, had been displaced more than once.
A tattered doll their mother picked out of the trash and other bits and pieces she scavenged are all the kids have for toys. It doesn't seem real. It's like a dream, Withaq says, of the home they left behind. It's all gone. The family fled Mosul in the middle of the night, but still, Withaq and her husband couldn't spare their children, the horrors. We saw ISIS and a car with 3 bodies, and one had no arm, 7-year-old Yaksin says. One had his arm cut off and 2 didn't have legs, her younger sister adds. The girls didn't sleep for days. It's all too much for Withaq, haunted by the fear of the present and scars of the past. Twice over the last 10 years, her husband had a gun pointed to his head. They wanted to kill him because of his ID. Withaq can't hold back her tears. Because of his sect. The second time was when they were in a market, Withaq pregnant with one of the girls.
The family is mixed. They're both Sunni and Shia, and they used to live in Baghdad, but they had to flee the sectarian violence there. That's how they ended up in Mosul. For more than a decade now, Iraqis have been trying to keep themselves safe. This most recent ISIS offensive has caused what aid organizations are calling the single largest mass movement of people in such a short period of time in recent history.
Around 500,000 people fled Mosul alone over the span of just a few days, dispersed throughout Iraqi Kurdistan in areas like this one. But others are stuck in more remote parts of Iraq help can't reach. Aid agencies already buckling under the Syrian refugee crisis had to divert emergency supplies and desperately need more. Warning: Iraq and Syria's flow of refugees will impact the region in ways we haven't seen. Tears pouring down her face, Withaq can't understand how she ended up like this. I swear, my heart is burning. The lowlifes ruined our country. And from where did they come? From here, she says. Iraqis betrayed themselves.
Wolf, when you think about what this country has been through over the last 10 plus years, it's really difficult, if not impossible, to comprehend the U.S.-led invasion, the sectarian civil war that broke out here, dealing with the various insurgent groups and now ISIS. So many people that we're meeting in these refugee camps are so desperate that the first question that they're asking us is, can we get asylum anywhere outside of here? They'll talk about how much they love their country, but then they'll say to you, our country has been so cruel to us, now we just want to leave. Wolf?
More than 1 million refugees in Iraq alone. All right, Arwa, thanks for that heartbreaking report. As Arwa just showed us, the refugee crisis in Iraq is exploding. Specifically, there are an estimated 1.1 million displaced people now in Iraq, close to half of them fleeing the ISIS onslaught in the city of Mosul alone. And Syria's bloody civil war, in which ISIS has also played a key role, has driven many more from their homes. Close to 3 million people in Syria have left that country. More than 6 million are displaced and desperate within Syria. The impact is felt region-wide as Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey, they're grappling with an influx of hundreds of thousands, indeed millions of refugees. Up next, is Iraq destined to simply fall apart? Can the insurgents be halted? I'll speak with a key Iraqi insider, the former Iraqi ambassador to the United States. And a very nasty but very important election in Mississippi underway today. It's another big test for the Tea Party. Why are Democrats voting for a Republican?